Good afternoon, everyone. It has been a meaningful day so far, and this afternoon promised to be no less, probably even greater. I thank you, attendees, for displaying the ethos that NCU and the College of Business is so much proud of as a part of our day-to-day activity. We're going to begin this afternoon session by inviting Mr. Charles Evans, Assistant Professor in the College of Business and Management, to come and lead out this session for us. Mr. Evans.
So I don't get any clap? My goodness. Yes, let me feel good. Good afternoon, everybody. Listen, we are behind time, and so we really must go. We're having a presentation that's coming up that's going to be focusing on sexual harassment in the workplace. I guess the experience will be different for a male versus a female, and I'm not sure how it would go if I were to go to my boss and say, yeah, I'm being harassed. The culture, you know, but there's a principle. But I am not the one doing the presentation. Mark Grayson is the one.
Please forgive me. Is Mr. Jordan Bennett here?
I didn't see him, so that's why I took the liberty of just
Okay,
moving
thank you
on.
so much. I just want to know. Right, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So I took the liberty of just going for the jugular right away. By the way, I hear one Ms. Carla Roper is in the house, and I have to be careful how I speak because I may end up with a suit that I don't want to wear and can't afford. But welcome, ma'am. So Mark is an associate attorney. If you look at him, you would probably think that he's a student. And so I need to tell you things about him so you can understand the qualification with which he will take the lecturn. So he works at Employment Matters Caribbean on employment law. His practice spans a wide range of matters, including disciplinary hearings, redundancy exercises, and unjustifiable dismissal claims. Right? He works closely with the firm's principal consultant on cases that progress from local level negotiations to hearings before the Industrial Dispute Tribunal and the Supreme Court. He gets as high as that. His dedication to crafting solutions that align with clients' immediate and long-term objectives underscores his commitment to professionalism in his field. Now, his hands-on experience has allowed him to assist clients in navigating complex disputes, negotiating settlements, and advancing cases through formal proceedings when necessary. He takes pride in ensuring that each matter receives the careful attention it deserves, providing clients with clarity and strategic guidance. Whether representing employers or employees, Mark takes a practical approach that demonstrates the ability to break down intricate legal concepts into actionable advice that delivers results. You looking at him, you would never imagine that he has such depth because he looks very young. But he has had the experience, and no doubt under the coaching of his associates, I'm sure that he's doing well. He actively seeks opportunities to expand his knowledge, learning from each case while staying informed about developments in the legal landscape. This is current trends, so we can rest assured that he's coming with cutting-edge information. He's a graduate of the University of the West Indies, where he received his Bachelor of Laws degree, and the Norman Manley School, or Law School, where he obtained his legal education certificate. Now, on a lighter note, just so you get a feel of the person, he enjoys music, he enjoys watching movies, so he's a real person, which provide not an IA product, right? And that provides a creative outlet to help him maintain balance in a demanding career. These personal interests complement his professional life, offering him a well-rounded perspective that enhances his ability with clients and approach problems from fresh angles. Real cutting edge. Ladies and gentlemen, let me not bore you any longer, but allow you to listen. And please help me welcome to the lectern at this time, Mr. Mark Grayson. Thank you.
Well, after such an extensive introduction, I feel as though you guys know me better than I know myself. So let me go straight into the presentation. Now, we are quite aware that, thank you. Now, in light of the fact that you guys are entering into the world of work, we think it is quite imperative that you make yourself familiar with the legal framework or the legislations that exist to protect your interests when it is that you do venture down this, into this new phase of life. So one such piece of legislation is the Sexual Harassment Act. And this is a piece of legislation that was introduced by Parliament to ensure that the interest of all workers, and in fact, persons who are members of institutions such as NCU, and even persons who are tenants, are persons who benefit from accommodations. Their rights and their interests are protected, right? This is a piece of legislation that got the Governor General's assent back in November of 2021, and it came into law back in July of 2023. And essentially what this means is all workers, all employers, all institutions, and as I mentioned before, persons who provide accommodation, they are legally obligated to ensure that they have in place a system or a sexual harassment policy that would safeguard the interests that I alluded to before. Now, what is the purpose of this legislation? Before I venture into that, I'm going to give you a brief preview of how I'm going to, go about presenting this thing to you guys. So first, I'll give you a background. I'll then tell you what the current legal position is. After that, I will enlighten you on what the provisions of the new law are, and then I will veer off into what are the practical implications of this new regime. And finally, I will explain what the legal obligations of the employers are in light of the implementation of this new legislation. So the background. The problem of sexual harassment relates mainly to perceptions on socialization about male and female sexuality in society. And it can take many forms. Some of which are it's a criminal offense. If it is that you commit a sexual offense, such as sexual assault, you would have breached the Offenses Against the Persons Act, and that would constitute a criminal offense. So it is something that is quite severe in nature, right? And therefore it is incumbent on all of us to ensure that we are familiar or acquainted with this legislation. It also takes the form of gender-based discrimination and a breach of occupational safety and health duties. There is a piece of legislation that we refer to as OSHA that pretty much, it is not yet in effect, but it pretty much provides for, it ensures that all employees within the workplace are provided with a certain environment that is conducive to their, to the effective performance of their duties, and it also ensures that they are not prejudiced so far as their health is concerned while they carry out said duties. Now, we may all be familiar with the Me Too movement, and this is a movement that would have brought the whole idea of sexual harassment to the forefront. Now, I'm not saying that it was not something that was topical prior to then, but certainly with the advent of the Me Too movement, more people would have become aware of the serious implications of breaching people's rights to, enjoy their function in the workplace without having persons bestow upon them all kinds of, sexual offenses. Now, this Me Too movement would have, the phrase was one that became quite prominent in social media back in 2006, and it was one that was first used by an individual by the name of Tarana Burke, and it gained traction back in 2017 following the exposure of the sexual abuse allegations against Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of us would be aware of that, that whole episode. And we would probably be aware of the fact that he is now in prison because of what he would have done. That is, he was found to have been giving out roles to certain actresses, and probably even actors, I'm not sure, if it is that they were to provide him with sexual favors. And of course, this is something that is not frowned upon in our legal system, and in fact, in the legal system abroad. Now, there are other countries that also have a similar framework in place, such as the Bahamas. They have the Sexual Offenses Act of 1991. You have Belize. They have a Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, 1996. And it goes on and on. Lucia, British Virgin Islands, Barbados, Trinidad, and of course, Jamaica. So this is something that is gaining traction within our region. It is something that is being taken seriously, and rightfully so. Now, having said that, I'm certain that you may be wondering what exactly constitutes sexual harassment. Now, the language used to describe sexual harassment is quite broad. It is the making of an unwelcome sexual advance towards a person by another person, which is regarded as offensive or humiliating. This is something that should keep you on the edge of your seats, because it is not difficult for one to find themselves being subjected or falling subject to this legislation. If someone merely feels as though what you're doing is offensive, then that particular act would fall subject to the legislation, provided it is all unwelcomed, right? Now, the Act defines sexual harassment as the effect of interfering with the work performance of the person to whom the sexual advance is being made, or creating an intimidating, offensive, or hostile workplace environment. Now, certainly, you can see why it is that, being bombarded with a barrage of these kinds of remarks that are uncomfortable, would make the workplace uncomfortable, or, it wouldn't make it a place that you'd want to be for someone who would fall victim to such acts. Now, the use of the word person clearly indicates gender neutrality. So it isn't just male against female. It's also male against male, female against female, and female against male. And this is something that we ought to carefully consider, because one may believe that it's only a man against a woman. No, that's not the case, right? Females can also find themselves in hot water if it is that they breach this legislation. So that is something to consider. Now, the definition of a sexual advance, and this is covered in Section 2 of the Sexual Harassment Act. And it is basically any physical contact of a sexual nature, a demand or request for sex or favors of a sexual nature, sexual colored remarks, sexual advances, sexual suggestions, sexual innuendos, or showing pornography, or the display of images or objects of a sexual nature. And of course, any other physical gesture, verbal or nonverbal conduct of a sexual nature. So the scope is quite broad, and therefore we ought to be quite careful in how we interact with each other in the workplace. Now, the language also mentions that these acts ought to be unwanted, offensive, and humiliating. Unwanted, you can go to the dictionary, but it basically means uninvited, unasked for, unrequested. Offensive, insulting, derogatory. Crude, indecent. Humiliating is embarrassing, degrading. So essentially, you could be found to have committed sexual harassment if it is that you say something that someone finds to be uninvited and they're insulted by it and it causes them to blush. The threshold really isn't that high. So it is incumbent on all of you to ensure that you don't find yourselves in hot water, right? Now, when you look at, so as I would have mentioned before, both physical and nonverbal conduct can constitute sexual harassment. So far as the physical conduct is concerned, this is physically touching, caressing, kissing, sexual assault, indecent assault, rape, and as far as the nonverbal conduct is concerned, this is as simple as staring at someone's body, right? As I said, the threshold is not high. It's taking an unwanted picture of a person, a display of an explicit magazine or calendar. That too can qualify as sexual harassment. So we can now look into what this sexual harassment looks like, specifically in the workplace. Physical contact, such as prolonged hugs. You come off a vacation, you hug an employee a bit too long, and the person is suffer discomfort because of it. That can constitute sexual harassment. Unwanted kisses, you have to be careful, and other sexual contact. And the verbal behavior now, this can take the form of sexually suggestive comments or sharing inappropriate details of your marital or your lack of marital relationships. So the content of your conversations with your peers can actually open up the floodgates to this kind of legal repercussion. Now, cyber behavior also falls within this, falls under the umbrella of what constitutes sexual harassment. So sending inappropriate messages, photos or texts, emails or via social media can attract liability in this respect. Now, the legislation prohibits, and on a side note, to understand that this presentation is primarily focused on what it is that you guys may face when you go into the world of work. But as a corollary to that, you may find yourselves seeking accommodation to facilitate you actually carrying out those work-related purposes. So you may find yourself being subjected to this legislation as a tenant, and the legislation prohibits sexual harassment by any person in the course of providing or offering to provide accommodation. And this extends not only to the landlord, but also the agents of the landlord. So if you have someone who is cleaning up the residence, that person could be an agent. If you have someone who comes onto the residence to perhaps conduct repairs, that person would be an agent of the landlord, and he would therefore be subject to this piece of legislation. Now, the duty, specifically as it relates to the workplace, is placed on the employer to take every reasonable effort to ensure that his workers are not sexually harassed in the course of their employment. And this is a very high duty. And to understand how it applies, we need to look at the definition of certain keywords, such as employment. Now, employment, the definition of employment is any form of engagement of a worker. Now, it doesn't say that this worker has to be employed by the employer. No, so long as that employer engages someone. It could be someone who enters the premises to conduct repairs. It could be someone, it could be a stakeholder, it could be a third party. So long as that employer engages that individual, then the scope of employment would touch that person, or would encapsulate that person's capacity. Now, an employer is a person who engages in any form a worker. And I would have given you an overview of what that means. Now, who is an employer? A worker, rather. A worker is defined as a person who carries out work in any capacity for an employer, including an employee, whether in the private or public sector. Government is also a domestic worker, a person engaged under a contract for services or a subcontractor of that person. So when I mention someone who enters the premises to conduct repairs, that person would fall under that scope or under that umbrella. An employee of a person or subcontractor, a person whose service is procured or arranged by a company which is in the business of supplying workers for other businesses and who has been assigned to work in the business or undertaking, such as an agency worker. So you can see that the scope is quite broad. An apprentice, a trainee, an intern, a student gaining work experience, or even a volunteer. So we have to be quite careful out there, and you have to understand that even if it is that you're at a workplace in the capacity of an intern, you're covered by this legislation, and you ought to take solace in that fact. Now, a person, and it also covers a person designated by the minister after consultation with the labor minister. Now, how do we determine sexual harassment? To determine if an act, conduct, or behavior constitutes sexual harassment, the adjudicator must determine all of the circumstances surrounding the act, conduct, or behavior shall be taken into consideration. It shall be considered whether the act, conduct, or behavior constitutes a course of conduct, or, if not, was a significant single instance sufficiently serious to be so determined. So, it need not be one act. It can be a snowball, right? It can be many small acts. When looked at cumulatively, it constitutes a breach, right? So it doesn't have to be one big act. If it is that, yeah. So the determination shall be based on the findings in that particular case. So the tribunal is essentially at large to consider all the necessary variables that it considers salient to determine whether or not a particular act constitutes sexual harassment. And what I mentioned before are certain variables that it would consider in making this determination. Now, one of the major things that this piece of legislation requires of employers is that all employers must see to it that they have in place a sexual harassment policy. And to be honest with you, this is something that should have been in place since 2023, right? So it is incumbent on you as employees to ensure that you make the necessary inquiries to find out if this policy is in place, because it inures to your benefit. It protects you. So it is you who should ask the necessary questions to ensure that the safeguard is in place for your well-being. Now, the Act requires the employer to issue the policy in respect of the prevention of sexual harassment. So you ought to be issued this policy when, right after signing on the dotted lines. So the moment you're an employee, ensure that you are provided with this policy. And the employee, and they should take all reasonable steps to bring this policy to the attention of the worker. So in a perfect world, when the worker is being provided with their contract, this is a document that would accompany that document, would accompany that contract. But of course, it's not a perfect world, so do your checks, your own checks, to ensure that you're protected. And this exposure also extends to third parties, subcontractors, service providers, as I would have mentioned before. Now, the next question that you may be wondering is, what should this policy contain? This policy should contain a very clear definition of what it is that constitutes sexual harassment. So the workers should not be wondering, what kind of activities, what kind of conduct would qualify as sexual harassment. So that should be in the policy, quite pronounced at the very beginning, preferably. And there should be a statement that workers are entitled. It's not something that they're just providing to the workers as a mere favor. They are entitled to an environment free from sexual harassment. And this is provided for specifically the legislation has a schedule. And in this schedule, it kind of gives you an idea of what it is that a sexual harassment policy should look like. And this statement is one of the very first statements in that policy, just to show you just how important it is. Now, the institution should ensure that there are internal mechanisms and procedures in place for making complaints and for resolving and settling such complaints. So there are certain roles, such as welfare officer and anti-sexual harassment committees. These are roles that ought to be filled by employers, by individuals, and these individuals would handle each sexual harassment claim that is brought to them by an employee. And if it is that such an internal mechanism does not exist in any particular workplace, then an employee is at liberty to go to the sexual harassment tribunal, which I will get to later, and make their claim there. So the legislation is very much aware of the fact that not all workplaces may be in compliance, but it's not going to sit there and wait for the companies to be in compliance. It's going to provide the employees with alternative avenues to acquire this protection that they are entitled to. So, this policy should also contain a statement of possible disciplinary measures that would befall an individual that is in breach of it, and there should also be a statement of confidentiality. So if it is that you make a claim, your identity should be protected. And there's actually another piece of legislation, the Data Protection Act, that provides for this kind of it provides for this level of confidentiality, in the sense that if it is that your information, if it is that when you're making this complaint, you provide information that's considered personal data or sensitive personal data, then the company is legally, bound to not expose this information to anyone. There should also be a statement that all internal mechanisms must be exhausted before recourse to the sexual harassment tribunal is pursued. Now, I would have mentioned this sexual harassment tribunal before when I stated that you could go there if it is that the company or your workplace does not have in place the internal mechanisms that it ought to have in place. But if it does have these internal mechanisms in place, then the worker is obligated to make use of that before proceeding to the Sexual Harassment Tribunal for redress. And it should also allow persons to approach the tribunal directly. And this is what I mentioned before, where circumstances so warrant. Now, what should the employer do in respect of this piece of legislation? They ought take immediate and appropriate action to deal with sexual harassment of workers where they become aware of it. So they can't sit on the claims when they receive it. They have to act immediately. This is something that is very serious, and Parliament, when they brought this piece of legislation to being, it was their intention that the company or the business would would act with alacrity when they are treating with sexual harassment claims, and so much so that failure to do so will create criminal liability, and the aggrieved employee may make a claim to the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. Now, there are certain prohibited activities that I will provide some insight on. Now, employers or supervisors are prohibited from sexually harassing workers. And employers are likewise, they should not make it appear to a worker that job prospects or working conditions are contingent on acceptance or tolerance of sexual advances. So it cannot be that the workplace or the environment in the workplace is such that you believe that you cannot elevate unless you provide your superior or your supervisor with sexual favors. That is frowned upon, and quite frankly, it is unlawful. The worker, and it cannot be that the worker is put in a state of mind that he or she believes that they will suffer disadvantage in employment unless they are tolerant of sexual advances by the employer. Furthermore, the worker is prohibited from harassing co-workers. So it's not just employers against employees. The worker is also under duty to ensure that he or she doesn't sexually harass his co-workers. A client shall not sexually harass a worker. A worker shall not sexually harass a client, and so on and so forth. So all parties that this piece of legislation covers is under a duty to not harass, their fellow human beings. Now, prospective employers are also covered in that they are prohibited from sexually harassing job applicants. So the moment you enter an office to conduct an interview, you're covered by this piece of legislation, because you cannot be given the impression by virtue of the dialogue that you would be engaged in with this by the person who wishes to hire you, that you being hired is contingent on you being willing to provide him with sexual favors. This is not allowed. And so there is a specific kind of offense that is provided for in this act, and that's called quid pro quo. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, and this is when a prospective employer, current employer, or supervisor makes it appear to the worker that their working conditions, or in fact their ability to work, is contingent on them accepting these sexual advances. The Sexual Harassment Act establishes what I would have mentioned before, which is the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. And this is a body that is charged with the responsibility to hear complaints from aggrieved workers or students or residents, because as I said, this extends to persons who provide accommodation as well. And in fact, even institutions such as NCU, it being an institution, And so it hears these complaints with respect to the employers or institutions' failure to deal with sexual harassment. So you can take solace in knowing that there is always present a means by which you can get redress if it is that you find yourself falling victim to any such activity or conduct. This panel it comprises of 14 individuals. One of them is an attorney at law. This attorney at law must have 4 years to 10 years of practice at the bar, and at least a half of the appointed members must be females. And it sits a panel of 3 persons appointed by the chairperson. Each panel must have at least 1 person of either gender, and 3-year tenure eligible for reappointment. So, we can now look at the enforcement mechanisms that are in place, or essentially the mechanisms to ensure that people don't take this thing lightly, or in other words, sanctions, right? Punishment. So generally, a complaint must be made within 12 months from the date of the alleged failure or contravention, or where the course of conduct is comprised of a series of alleged acts within 12 months from the date of the last alleged act. So I would have mentioned earlier that it doesn't necessarily have to be one act. It can be a series of acts which culminate to make a ground for this kind of complaint. And in such a case, it is the last act. It is at the occurrence of the last act that the time would begin to run. This 12-month time frame, the limitation period begin to run. However, of note, there are certain types of breaches of the act that allow for a complaint to be made up to 6 years. And these are offenses that would be of a much more egregious nature and may very well qualify as sexual assault as opposed to mere sexual harassment. And further, with the extraordinary circumstances, it is within the discretion of the tribunal to hear complaints that are made beyond the 6-year limit period. So it is the tribunal that will look at the facts and make a determination as to whether or not this extended time period ought to be granted. The tribunal may use best efforts reasonable to resolve a complaint, or may take all or any step that it considers reasonable to effect an amicable solution of the complaint, and may therefore adjourn an inquiry at any stage to enable the parties to negotiate with a view to settlement by amicable arrangements. So the policy doesn't necessarily envision an adversarial type of, proceedings. If it is that the parties can allow better judgment or, reason to prevail, and they're able to come to a settlement, then the legislation affords for such a settlement to take place. The tribunal may give each party to an inquiry reasonable opportunity to call a witness or give evidence, examine and cross-examine witnesses and make submissions. So this kind of language is quite reminiscent of a court case. You can expect that it doesn't necessarily have to be conducted by attorneys, but you'd be provided with the opportunity to face your accuser. The accuser will be provided with the accused will be provided with an opportunity to face their accuser and cross-examine and provide examination in chief as is necessary. And they may also direct that the name, identity, and address of any person be protected. And as I mentioned before, the Data Protection Act provides an additional layer of protection in respect of the exposure of this kind of information. And it may also direct that no particulars of a complaint is published without prior written approval of the tribunal. And a party to an inquiry may be represented by an attorney at law or any other person, or may elect to be self-represented. So you don't necessarily have to fork out a lot of money to pay for legal representation. If it is that you want someone else to represent you, you're at liberty to do so. Any decision or award of the tribunal shall be binding on the complainant and the respondent appearing before the tribunal, and shall take effect from such date as may be specified in the order having regard to the circumstances of the case. So any decision made has a binding effect. Now the tribunal isn't necessarily court, but whatever decision they make is about as strong as any decisions that may come from the four walls of a courthouse. Any aggrieved person who is dissatisfied with the decision or award of the tribunal may appeal to the Supreme Court, and this appeal would take the form of a judicial review, right? So if it is that you're not pleased with the outcome at that stage, you can proceed to having it heard before regular judges. You're at liberty to do so. So the law provides you with several avenues to ensure that any form of sexual harassment that you may find yourself being victim to is ventilated before a body that is equipped, that is knowledgeable of the legislation, and that is capable of providing you with the redress that such a situation would require. Now, a person who fails to attend an inquiry of the tribunal without reasonable excuses, or without reasonable excuse fails or refuses to furnish information or produce documents under the Act, commits an offense, right? And this also extends to persons who, while appearing as a witness or witness at the inquiry, refuses or fails to be sworn or make affirmations, or refuses or fails to answer any question required to be answered. This person would be guilty of an offense and may be slapped with a fine not exceeding $1 million. And this would be dealt with at the parish court level. So this, as you can see, is quite serious. It is something that I implore all of you to look into further. What I provided you with here is a mere snippet. There's much more to it. It concerns you, it touches you, pun intended. So it is incumbent on you all to ensure that you do your research, because you're going out into the world of work. The world isn't perfect, right? We know we have all kinds of persons, you know, they give you big smiley faces, but they have all kinds of nefarious intentions, you know, looming behind those smiles. So do your research and be safe whilst out there. Thank you.
This has been a wonderful experience. This topic affects me and it affects you. So we better listen carefully and take note of what was said. Thank you so much, Mr. Grayson. I am not giving the vote of thanks. What I'm going to ask you, student, was there anything said today that you were not aware of? Or was there anything said that was not as clear that you would like to just share that point? What is it that you have learned that you did not know from this presentation? And we're going to move fast. Just raise your hand so we can come to you. Tell me one thing you have learned that you did not know. Remember, it affects you and it affects me. Is there a mic, or you can stand? Just stand for me and tell me. Over there.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so in terms of the presentation, I was not aware that you needed 14 members to be a part of the tribunal. That is very informative. The breakdown, actually, that is also informative, because I did not know the contents that you needed an attorney or 4 attorneys at law to be on this tribunal as well. So it was very informative. I've seen the policies, but I've never gone through the actual act. So the breakdown of the act in this particular way served as a very valid lecture for myself and I think my colleagues. Thank you.
Is there anyone else have a point to share? Okay, we're not going to waste time on it if you don't. That means you know it's important to you and me. Do you have one more? Thank you.
So good afternoon again, everyone. One point that really stood out for me was I like the way that they included females, so I was not aware that you needed at least half of the persons on the panel to be females, and also that if you fail to attend an inquiry of the tribunal without reasonable excuse, then you would have committed an offense. So I think that in itself was very informative for me personally. Thank you.
Thank you. For me, I did not know sexual harassment has a look like. And some of you that have done class with me know about the look like and the song like. So thank you, Mr. Grayson, for showing me and telling me what it looked like. Okay, do we have any questions for Mr. Grayson? Any question? Okay, I'm going to invite Miss Michaela Graham to come and move the vote of thanks on behalf of the College of Business and Management, Colloquium 2026.
So, Mr. Grayson, hold on. Yeah, I was hoping to get one of the other ones. Okay. Oh, I did. That was a way too long. So, Mr. Grayson, on behalf of, I would assume the final year students at the Northern Caribbean University, I would personally like to thank you for coming out here today and to just reminding us of the importance of not committing a breach in terms of the Sexual Harassment Act. And I'm sure we would have learned so much from you being here and you presenting. And we just would like to present this small token of our appreciation to you today. And we hope to hear from you again. Thank you.
I'm sure you can download your copy of the act from the website, which ministry? Ministry of Gender Affairs website. So you can download your copy. Again, it affects you and it affects me. I'm going to invite Mr. Charles Evans back to the podium to introduce our next presenter.
Just two announcements before I go into the actual introduction. The assignment for current trends will be posted on Orion, and you will have 1 month in which to complete that assignment and submit. Okay? Of course, only registered students will be able to access that assignment, so make sure that your registration is duly regularized. While I'm at it, even though you're going out, this will be a very relevant and very much like current trends when on Tuesday, March 31 at 2 p.m., Mr. Wayne Chen, the president of the Jamaica Employers Federation, will be coming to NCU to address the business students looking at the job market, the future job market for Jamaica. So that's pretty much like current trends. Where are we going? In the face, of course, of AI. So what will that look like from his perspective? And I think his perspective will be very, very relevant and something that we all would want to know. You know, as we approach AI and listening to the conversations this morning, we could either see AI as this monster that's let loose in a jungle of of the job market, and we have to be so careful that we successfully hide from this monster. Or we could see it as a horse, a stallion, a strong stallion that could take us to the exotic places of our ambitions. How do we face it? It is going to be important that we get a strategy in approaching AI. Will some of the things that we say be just like putting your head under the sand? Is AI a real threat to us eventually? While you think about that, coming to address us now is Dr. Steve Lawrence, who is a transformational educational leader, researcher, and technology strategist with 30 years of experience across technical and vocational education and training, TVET, government, academia, and industry. He currently serves as director/principal of the Southwest TVET Institute Region 5, Heart NSTA Trust, where he leads multi-campus institutional transformation focused on workforce readiness, innovation, and inclusive skills development. With a background in computer science, curriculum leadership, and organizational transformation, Dr. Lawrence specializes in competency-based education and training, CBET, technology-enabled learning, and the integration of research into curriculum design and delivery. His work supports the development of responsive standards, modern learning resources, and digital TVET ecosystems aligned with evolving labor market demands. What he has to say will be very relevant. A published researcher and national thought leader, his current research examines, and listen to this, how artificial intelligence, data analytics, and digital systems can strengthen curriculum development, improve training effectiveness, and enhance evidence-based decision-making within education systems. He has presented regionally and internationally on AI in education, digital transformation, and future, this is where your ears are going to prick up, future-ready workforce strategies. Dr. Lawrence, his work continues to advance research-informed innovation and collaboration between education, industry, and policy to support sustainable skills development and national growth. One thing you can say about Dr. Lawrence is that he has honed the art of presence. I don't know if it has to do with his voice that is commanding or just his presence. But ladies and gentlemen, please do help me make welcome to the lectern and at this point, Dr. Steve Lawrence.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been interesting listening to not only the presentations that are shared, but also just listening to the conversations within the space. I see many friends, I see colleagues who have served with And being a past student of this wonderful institution, I understand the journey to work, the journey of work, and the kind of development and growth that actually takes place when you're in this space, in this beacon on the hill. Now, this afternoon we'll be talking about job risk. When you hear job risk, what comes to mind? Anyone from the floor? Job risk. AI, that's what someone said. Any other risks to jobs out there apart from AI now? Scarcity, misalignment of skills. The truth is, with every disruptive technology that enters the stage, we have an option. We can either freeze and panic, or we can mitigate. Now, what does that word actually mean? What does it mean to mitigate? To pivot, to limit, to manage. Why do you use the brake in your car? So you can stop, so you don't end up hitting someone or crashing or dying. Someone said dying. And in the same way, artificial intelligence, just like the tool of a car, has to be managed in a way that allows us to get the benefit of it. So, how many people in this room have used, well, we're just coming out of a hurricane, so you would have used a hammer. Anybody used a hammer since October? Anyone? No? No? Wow, wrong crowd. All right. So how many of you used your fingers as keyboard warriors to comment on what was happening in the response to the hurricane and the damage it did to the west of the country? All of us? Am I in the wrong space? So you've just been having the greatest time. You have not been affected by anything and you're ready for heaven, right? All right, so I probably need to just close this and have a conversation, a Bible conversation. So in Genesis, right, what happened was God came into a space that was void. And when it was void, he spoke. And what happened? Things were created. In a similar way, AI entered the space, not a few years ago as most people think, but for many decades it was a part of Siri, it was about Alexa, it was about all these systems that were being used to kind of figure out how to use data and tools to mimic human function. Now, we've gotten really good at it to the point where now one of the biggest concerns is actually, where do we go from here? So our Bible study will take us to the next slide where we'll be looking at the types of artificial intelligence so you can figure out the kinds of mitigation that you will need. So, what are the three types we're seeing here? We're seeing the one that we're all using, ChatGPT, Claude, we're using generative AI. But how many people are using agentic AI? Any hands? Raise hands in this room. How many people have converted their complete workflow? Okay, I'm in the perfect place. So self-aware AI? No one? Anyone? Oh, this is not happening. All right, I need everyone to stand. Let's everyone stand. Let's stand, let's stand, let's stand, let's stand, let's stand. Everyone, let's stand. Stand. Nice. Now, in Jamaican culture, there's this actual fruit that is considered to be used by those who need a clean heart. So in the Bible and in our hymnal we sing, "Create in me a clean heart." But in our local parlance, it is used to wash the heart off. How anybody know about that fruit? It's called a coconut. So after lunch, as you settle into being very comfortable and relaxed and less responsive, sometimes you need to stretch a bit. So we're going to be spelling that fruit, C, everyone, C, O, C, O, or the N gonna N, everyone, N, I need to see you Nning, U, T. All right, let's go again. Now quickly. C, O, C, O, N, U, T. All right, good. Everyone have a seat now. Now let's do this. Now, right now, we have three things we're going against. We have artificial intelligence that is generative, so we're using it for assignments, we're using it for emails. But there's also agentic, where we're doing entire workflows, where you can have it knock out a dissertation, it will go and do the research, and it will find the studies, and it will call them, and it will make sure it's coming from high-impact journals, and it will validate, and it will create data tables, and it will do the cross-analysis. And then we have the more recent deployment, as in they're discussing it now in the Ukraine war, where they want to have self-aware AI deployed as soldiers. In the next slide, it talks about the different things you need to mitigate as people who are actually trying to find jobs or going into new jobs or looking to change roles. For generative AI, all it does, it's a cognitive amplifier. So if you're very straight to the point, but you need a bit more emotion in your text and in your emails, you can drop it in and say, make it more friendly and warm, and it will add all the flowers and roses. But that doesn't work for all things. You might be someone, you're a startup, you're kicking off your business, you need an admin assistant, you need an HR team that's going to run HR interviews and develop a tool and use behavioral analysis to select your candidates. You may actually need a back-end developer. How many people in an IT program now? Any IT, any computer science majors? None? Wrong crowd? Oh God. Wow. Right now, when I started IT in the 90s, we had to learn all the languages. I learned COBOL, RPG, Fortran, Pascal, a bunch of languages, and you had to actually learn all the language and the language syntax to actually write apps, write programs to function. Right now, about 85% of people who are selling their skills as software developers are actually using AI to generate code. Right now, the big thing is vibe coding. So chances are, if you buy a piece of software that's written in the last couple of years, your developer, no matter how classically trained, use AI as a cognitive amplifier. What that means is you no longer need to go to a desktop publisher and say, can I have my flyer designed in 3 weeks? You can write 6 lines of code and, well, prompts really, and it will draw, or even 3, right? And it will create your flyer and it will be production ready. Last week, I had a business launch at the Development Bank of Jamaica. And one of the things that came to me from my designer was actually really good, but it had some errors. Now, the turnaround loop for it to get to be printed in New Kingston, to get to the Development Bank, to be in the space, I had no time. I could not send it back. When I called him, he was traveling. I pulled the file. I wrote a prompt. It was edited. I sent it off to New Kingston. In 45 minutes, I had my pull-up banner. Now, having done that for years, that used to be a 3-4 week process. I was able to pull it off in 3 minutes of prompting, and the fact is the time difference of 45 minutes was really because I had to wait on the queue within the establishment. That is where we are in terms of the cognitive amplifier. Now, your question is, how do you use this in your space? On the next slide, we will talk about the fact that generative AI creates things, agentic AI does things, and self-aware AI understands itself. Now, that is the scary part, because what you just defined is pretty much what humans show up to work to do. You show up to create things. If you're a creative, you're in a space to create things. You can prompt now and generate a movie. You can prompt now and create an advert. You can prompt now and create a song. You don't need to know sheet music. You don't need to have backup singers. You can lift the vocals from all your favorite records, and you can then produce your own version of. Now, there are some ethical concerns, yes, but the challenge is that is in the space that you're going in to now sell yourselves for work. What do you need to do? In the reality of 2026, AI is transforming all industries. You can hardly find an industry that is not amplified or in some way infusing AI into their workflows. As a matter of fact, I even think hackers are benefiting. They got the news because the kind of attacks that people are seeing now on banking systems are unprecedented. Yesterday, a colleague of mine called me to say, "Can I borrow some money?" I said, "What's happening?" I had to shut down my accounts. This person used to run banking systems and was in charge of security. So they have a very tight structure, but guess what? Somebody is using AI to guess credit cards and testing them, and eventually some will work. And that's the reality. So it's not only about you, the people, and what skills you need. You also need to figure out, where do I fit in this new future just to be okay? I landed on Sunday of last week coming in from Florida on a fishing trip, and I missed one important step. I bought a magazine, I was flipping through it, I landed, I had not logged in and declared all the things I bought. That relegated me to a corner. I had to wait about 15 minutes to get it online, get it sent in. And then I thought about the fact that my mom is probably close to 80. How would she be managing in this space with her luggage and her this? And I said, wow, it means that in a few years, without the right artificial intelligence training, almost everyone is going to be behind those who took the first step. Now, what else does it mean? Task automation. Now, you're in an institution that does a lot of research. Now, if you are working on, how many people are at the graduate level? Who's doing a master's or a PhD program? Anyone in this space yet? Wrong group again. I'm going to need AI to support this one. But guess what? The automation problem is real, because the truth is a lot of the jobs that we do depend on a number of people being in the process. So you submit a document to be printed at a publishing house. It used to be that it goes in, somebody looks at it, it gets read, it's edited for grammar, it's sent back, you fix it, you send it back in, it gets checked again, then it goes to design, then it goes to pagination, then it goes through all this workflow. The truth is, most of those jobs no longer exist. They exist on paper because people are employed in these roles, but the truth is, in about 2 or 3 years, you will not be seeing adverts for some of these jobs, because once it can be pushed off to AI, you're in trouble. So what we need to be thinking about as learners, as people in education and in lifelong learning is, how do I look around the corner as to where we're going and figure out what do we need to do to mitigate, to dampen the effect and actually use this tool as a tool. Some of the sectors that are in trouble in Jamaica right now, the BPO sector is one of our biggest employers. But guess what? With the kind of voice automation that's available, now you can interact with an AI online, on the phone, and have no idea. The cadence is right, the tone is everything about it, and they can do it across all language sets. I saw someone at a function at the Pegasus 3 weeks ago, and she's a translator, and she was asking me if I knew anybody that needed a French translator. And that was sad because, yeah, with a subscription, it will translate into any known language in a way that is way more accurate than even the person who grew up in the spoken language. That's a big deal, and it's also a big threat. Now, what's the risk of inaction, as shown on the next slide? You're going to have the outcome, next slide, rising unemployment. You're going to have a skills mismatch because it's not that the skills that you have don't have JDs. It's not that it's not in an old advert. It's just that for the future, you will not have a place without doing some things differently. And then you will also have the bigger impact at a national level where if you're not producing in the economy, you're going to be a drag on the economy. What do the skills of the future look like on the next slide? Critical thinking, creativity, digital literacy, and emotional intelligence. Now, there's an advantage that the humans have. Empathy and leadership. No matter how good the AI system is, that bit of empathy, that human thing where you see a movie and you cry because someone, you know they're getting paid, right? You know they're actors and they're wealthy and they're well paid, but somebody gets hurt in a movie and we start to tear up and we start to, because that's how we're wired. AI hasn't figured that out yet. Ethical reasoning. The truth is, it's fed with data from systems that have the biases of the environment that it's in. So if it's in a system with racism, guess what? It's gonna mimic that kind of thing. And contextual judgment. Sometimes you'll use your AI and you'll ask it something and it's gone south and you expect it to go north. The other risk of unemployment is people will start to feel angry about their frustration. Whenever you lose a job and your bills still keep coming, it's real for you as a human being. A machine has no empathy for that. As a matter of fact, shareholders are going to love this because it's going to give them more yield. There's a guy I keynoted with last year at a research conference. He's an investment banker and he had about $4 to $5 billion under management, and that was by his AI. So he's running, he has a $9 subscription to one of his favorite AI agents, and he gave it a portfolio to trade. He taught it to trade the way he traded, and it started to optimize his trades and perform pretty much in the same way that he performs. Now, that's good for him, but that's also a signal that even investment bankers, actuaries who used to be able to command amazing salaries from insurance companies, they are also at risk. So it's not even about you being brilliant anymore, because with a few clicks and a prompt engineered properly, I can bring a neurologist into the room, a neurosurgeon into the room, a psychologist into the room, and get feedback that pars with the human intellect. What is the strategic response? We need policy governance. We have to figure out what guardrails are in it. Some of you are not old enough to know about the Concorde. The Concorde used to be a plane that used to cut time travel in like a quarter of what it is. Typically from the US to London, it's like 12 hours, 11 hours, depending, even 9, depending on which flight, which route. I think they were clocking it in like 3 hours or under 4 hours. But it had an accident and they decided we no longer need to actually be that fast commercially. So even though we can do some things with AI, the truth is we're going to get to a place where we have to figure out where to draw the line. Should AI determine whether or not a patient stays on life support? That should still remain a human decision, because it might actually just do the most efficient thing, which is, oh, he's not breathing on his own? Okay, off. That's not what you want in this space. It might be very efficient, but it's not very human, and it lacks empathy. For institutions like NCU, it means a curriculum redesign. I'm a part of a conference that's going on in Kingston, being put on by CXC. Tomorrow I'll be talking about artificial intelligence on a panel. But one of the things that the US contributors to the forum came with was the fact that they have had to be rewriting all their curriculum so that even the accountant is no longer just an accountant. It's an accountant with AI certification and training. Because QuickBooks has gotten really quick. Like the software is helping you right now. So what you would need 10 humans for, you now need 1 or half. That's serious because that changes the whole dynamics of employment. And the other thing, your greatest strategy is lifelong learning. I was in a class on Sunday. I'll be in a class next Sunday. I have another course starting in June. I teach a course in November, and I'm wondering if I'll be teaching that course because I may end up enrolling something else. You have to figure out that staying ahead of the curve actually means continually learning. So I know you're looking forward to getting out of here and graduating, but I have some news for you. Keep learning. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm going to close with some very encouraging stuff. The job creation that comes from AI, the new and emerging industries, the new entrepreneurial opportunities, the AI-enabled sectors are real. You actually have opportunities that will come. To put it in context, and I want you to move on screen to the two human beings standing side by side. So let's move forward and we're talking about who is real. So if whoever is controlling that, who is real? So we're moving past that. We're moving past that. We're moving past that. And I need you to tell me on the screen which is the human. Which is AI, which is the human? So let me see the hands of those who say the lady is the human. The hands that say the man is the human. All right, let's do this again. Huh? Is there a third option? None of them are human? All right. So the truth is, on the left, you have an actual created human being by God. However, on the right, meet Moya. Now, Moya is an AI-enabled robot that is so now designed that even to the touch, she is warm as touching a human. They have actually engineered it that when you interact with a handshake, she will blush, she will make eye contact, she will be reserved, she'll have mood swings. That is what we're up against. This was available as of 4 weeks ago on the market in a country. I think it was Shanghai or one of them. So the future is real, the struggle is real. Next slide. So this was unveiled, right? And it's completely AI-powered, vision, facial expression capabilities. She will recognize and remember people. She'll call you by name, interact naturally, respond to even emotional cues like a wink, a thumbs up, all that stuff. And the line has finally been blurred. So as I close, this is the reality of what we face, and it's projected in the next slide. Over the next 5 years, we're looking at a loss of about 92 million jobs to AI or AI replacement. Now, how are we feeling about this? This is scary, right? Yes. However, the next slide actually brings some hope. There's actually the view that you'll have a replacement of about 1.8 where for every job that AI takes, it will actually create a new job or create new opportunities for employment. But it actually means that we need to retool. Which areas are we supposed to be looking at? On the next slide, we see what is at risk on the right. Entry-level jobs, admin assistants, HR recruiting teams. Even last year, I had a colleague that was working on an AI-powered psychologist. So the truth is, there's some stuff that's coming, but really the response needs to be just transformation of your skills, AI reskilling, decision support, remote work becomes a thing, and AI literacy and innovation is your best bet. I'm not saying you have to go back and do a whole full degree, but at least know how to prompt engineer, at least know how to move things and create things and automate things, because the courses are free and they're available. As I close, where we need to be pitching our sales is not in a scary place of, oh, the jobs are going. It's about where should I look? Where am I interested in having AI amplify my skills? Remember, one of the first things we said, it's a cognitive amplifier. So let us now amplify our skills, learn new things, learn how to use the technology to augment our learning. I thank you for being here. I thank you for listening to me. And I hope we all plan to go learn some AI-enabled aiming, artificial intelligence mitigation. Have an amazing afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence.
No problem.
I still have more growing to do. This was a very interesting topic. And we need to know that AI is transforming the workplace. We thank Dr. Lawrence for such presentation. Do you have any question for Dr. Lawrence? Any question for Dr. Lawrence? One? Have a question? There's a microphone that we can take the question. Come, Dr. Lawrence. Question.
Oh,
We're going to take a few questions.
all right, no problem. This light is hot like fire, though.
I know. Is there a microphone that we can take the question for Dr. Lawrence?
Yes, questions, anyone? You still need it? Okay. Oh, it's not going to work. Let's get your mic. Yeah, see? I could take that risk, but not you. Yeah, yeah.
Testing? Yes.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for such an insightful presentation.
You're welcome.
And I think from the discussions, what we've all learned, I'm speaking on behalf of the audience, is that the space that we need to tap into is the human elements, the
Yes.
empathy, the relations, all of that. And I was with you until you got to the photo. Because now she's winking.
Yes.
Now she's responding to emotional cues.
Yep.
So what does that mean in the next maybe year for us?
All right.
Is the strength still gonna be the human element?
All right, so the truth is, a response to that has to be guided by data. The latest data that we have is encouraging, because even though the projection is that we'll lose about 92 million jobs over the next 5 years, the replacement rate of 1.8 is great, because it means that for every job lost, there are going to be 2 new opportunities, 1.8, almost 2 new opportunities. It may not be how you did it before. And I'll give you an example. Last year, I was teaching an information management course for CMU. Now, typically when I teach that course, I teach it by myself. 2 years now, I've run an experiment where I trained my agent and I called it Dr. O'Neill. Now, I gave it a bit more empathy, a bit more, that's my middle name. So I was like, and every time I marked a script, I would actually have it remark and give me reasons why I should either remove marks or add marks. And it gave me some really solid feedback. You know, there were times when I was correcting for grammar and whatnot, when the course wasn't an English course, it was about semantics and sequence and whatnot. And what it has done for me, it has kind of closed the loop where there's some gray areas in the alignment between how I taught and how I assessed. It made me a much better faculty member. What that means is, by the time it comes around in November when I teach that course again, I may actually model a complete, I'm still going to sign a contract and collect my salary, but it will actually end up teaching for me, and I will be in the room just as a spectator or as an auditor. And by the time we get to 2027, I may not even be in that room any at all. I haven't figured out if I'll still get a contract then, but I know I'll evolve based on my lifelong learning preference. Oh, sorry. No other questions? Great.
Okay, I'm going to ask Miss Michaela Graham to come and move the vote of thanks for Dr. Steve Lawrence.
Oh. She can say it. Oh, we're almost the same.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Delis Lieutenant Sergeant. Sorry for the confusion. Dr. Lawrence, I want to say thank you for coming and giving us valuable information about how to stay ahead of the curve, yes, and how it is important that we use AI to amplify us in many ways. I thank you and I appreciate you. It's a token of our appreciation.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
All right, moving right along. All right, so I just lost the profile for the speaker. But coming next is Dr. Damon Mitchell, who is the Associate Provost in charge of digital education. He's also Associate Professor, who is also Chair of the Computer Information Sciences Department. He graduated from NCU in 2007, I believe, with a bachelor's in information science, minor in education. He also did a master's and PhD in cybersecurity. Now, the main thing that he's going to be talking about is cybersecurity. It's all about AI today, it seems. It's all about what's happening on the platform, because that's where life is going. Dr. Mitchell really needs no introduction, so please help me make him welcome at this time to the lectern. Thank you.
You have to be restricted. You have to be restricted. I like to move her. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, let's try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so for the next 10 minutes, I will be going through a very important topic, that of cybersecurity in the workplace, protecting your digital identity. So that's the focus for this presentation. So on the screen, you should be seeing the slides, and I want you to be as interactive as possible. I know it's almost at the end of the day, and some of you may be tired, but just give me 10 minutes. And if you're sleeping, I'll take 15 minutes. So ensure that you stay awake for the 10 minutes as we go through this presentation. Now, next slide, please. So I'll just say next and you advance with me. So as we think about the digital business environment today, and you're all in the College of Business and Management, a very topical area now is in the area of digital services. What we have found is that many companies today, they rely heavily on digital systems. So for example, when was the last time you went into the bank to conduct a transaction? Probably, unless you are someone who is not so au fait with the online technologies. But most of us, we're doing everything online, even purchasing our credit from Scotia or NCB because those services are there. So many of our financial transactions are done online. Now, you may be doing a course like MIS for argument's sake, and you'd have heard about things like cloud services, mobile banking, e-commerce. That's the way of the future. Now, many companies are not talking about on-premises infrastructure anymore. They're talking about going to the cloud technologies. And with all of these, we're seeing that the risk factors associated with cyber is also increasing. There are many thrusts out there today for digital transformation. And with the digital transformation, guess what? We will now have a lot more risk factors with these organizations. Now, did you know that there are several cyber attacks daily? Did you know that every 39 seconds there's a cyber attack? Could you go to the next slide? Every 39 seconds, just imagine that, there is a cyber attack. In other words, we have over 2,200 cyber attacks per day globally. Now, when you think about the cyber attacks, the ones that are detected, we have up to 600 million globally. You talk about these attacks where people's data being impacted, being leaked. We have about 4.6 million. Now, identity theft. When was the last time you searched for your name online and you saw somebody else? And you're wondering, what has happened? Has somebody stolen my identity? Or you went to NHT or another company to do a transaction, and then when your name is entered, there's somebody else, same address, same phone number, same date of birth, and you're wondering, what has happened? This is called identity theft. Now, what we have seen over time is that there is a proliferation in the context of phishing. How many persons have heard the term phishing? Not the F-I-S-H-I-N-G, but the P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G, phishing attacks. And these are always coming to us in our emails, and they're sent every day. So with all these threats, why then would we consider cybersecurity to be an important issue for us, even though you're not in the computer science department, but you're more in the business department? Why is this critical for you? Why? Because it is one of the fastest growing global threats out there. 2, companies are losing billions annually to cyber fraud. I mean, they're losing so much to cyber fraud. Individuals are being targeted every day, as I mentioned, through phishing and identity theft. And then we have business professionals who must now understand the risks associated with cyber attacks. I want us to now focus on some of the common threats in the workplace. I spoke about the phishing attacks that are quite prominent. I want you to take out your phones now. Look in your inbox and you should see an email. In the email, you'll see 6 digits. You are to come to the front and give me those 6 digits. And if you are able to give me those 6 digits, I will speak to Mr. Edward Morris to see if he can give you a bonus point or 2. So I heard a question, which email, sir? Now, this is part of a technique that we call social engineering, which is one of the points through which the phishing attacks will take place. So it sounded believable. It sounded like, oh, I could really do with some bonus points here. But I don't even have your email addresses, and I saw persons taking out their phones. I don't even know your names. But persons were getting ready to check their emails to send me those 6 digits. Now, that is part of the problem that we find in our companies, that one of the weakest links in any organization is always the people factor. Because, we're not able to control our emotions, so you get an email and the first thing you want to do is to click or download or to forward that particular email. There are many fake websites out there, many fake websites. And you go to a website and we call it like it's a spoof. So you go to our website and it looks like Amazon.com. It looks the same way, but when it's time for you to pay, you realize that it's not looking like Amazon. But because you were already tricked, you still continue the process, and then lo and behold, your accounts are compromised and you start to wonder what's next. Now, malwares are very, 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 very dangerous today. And because we have companies that allow people to do a BOYD. What is BOYD? What is BOYD? I mean, as a business, even this is not really IT. BOYD, and these are policies that organizations may have. BOYD, bring your own device. I've never heard that term before. BOYD, bring your own device. So in other words, companies will say, I can't give you a personal computer, but you can bring your personal devices to work. However, there are certain restrictions. Now, what this does, it introduces greater risk for malwares. And we know that a malware is like a virus. Now, ransomware now is where many companies are struggling. For example, the hackers come, they infiltrate your systems, they move laterally, and then they start to encrypt all your files, all your resources. The next thing, you don't have access to your student records, you don't have access to your financial records, you don't have access to the business data, because these are all encrypted. And they say, okay, you must pay us some bitcoins in order for us to decrypt this particular file or the data set. This is a real threat for our businesses today. I mentioned the social engineering attacks. All they're doing is playing on your emotions. They say, do you know this man from Mandeville? And you say, yes. They start to say, oh, yes, I know him. And you responded to the email. Oh, yes. Do you know this one from your church? Oh, yes, yes. And you responded. And then when the hacker now has gained your confidence, then they say, okay, here's a link to do X or to do Y. They don't just come to you and just say, click on this link. The true social engineering attack says, I go on Facebook and I know everything about you first. We call that open source intelligence. So open source intelligence is, I find out everything about you. I know your favorite color. I know what you ate Sunday because you put it on Instagram and you put it on WhatsApp. And I know everything about you. So when I come to you, I am saying things that are familiar. So you say, oh, this person, he really knows me. And then you fall a victim. Another challenge we have is weak passwords. Let me see a show of hands. Those individuals who are using the same password for everything you own. You don't have to be ashamed. You're going to change it after this presentation. You have the same password for Gmail, for ARI, and for Moodle, for your phone, for everything. Because you can't remember. All right? And then you're using passwords that are not only used for all your devices, but they are considered weak. So your password is, I love you, baby. I mean, that's easy as a hacker. That's easy. I mean, I don't need to do much of a brute force to get that password, because I figure that I run it through a dictionary and I say, oh, I love you, baby. Or I miss you, or you put your date of birth, or you put some things that we can easily pick up. Those are referred to as weak passwords. When was the last time you checked if your accounts have been compromised? I want you to write down this address. Have I been pawned? And the pawned is PWNED. HaveIBeenPawned.com. Go there, put in your email address or addresses, and run it. And it will show you if your passwords have been exposed on the web, either the dark web or otherwise. HaveIBeenPawned.com. That's one of the things. You need to know if your credentials have been stolen. If you see anything online when you put in your password, you must go immediately and change your passwords. All right, that's part of the assignment. You must change your passwords immediately. Now, one of the major threats today is that of insiders. So within an organization, no matter how many security awareness training sessions are held, companies are always wary about the insiders. Those who are disgruntled, they didn't get the pay increase and they are upset. And they know how to manipulate the system and they put what we call a backdoor in the system and they are now able to expose and you fire them, oh, big mistake. You fire them and when they leave, they come back and they are malicious. The insider threats. Very, very, very a major risk factor here. So with all the things I've said now, how do you protect yourself? How do you protect yourself? One, you must use strong, next slide, strong and unique passwords. Now, what is a strong password? You may have seen this. A strong password must have letters, numbers, special characters, upper and lower case letters. Now, some persons are not able to come up with these complex passwords, so we introduce a concept known as phrasing. So, for example, I could have a password like Ricardo from Mandeville. So I'm Ricardo, and I'm from Mandeville. But what I will do now is that I will replace letters with special characters or numbers. So the I's now become ones, the E's become threes, the L, the at or whatever. So you start to replace these letters with special characters and numbers, and this is referred to as phrasing. So if you can't create complex passwords, then you can opt to use the phrasing approach. But you must have strong passwords, and a strong password must be a minimum of 16 characters. Some persons will say 12, but 16, that's where you want to start. So password 123 is not an option after today. Right? Password 123 is not an option. Now, how many persons have enabled what we call multi-factor authentication? So the company gives you an account or you have your personal account, but you want to use MFA. We call it multi-factor authentication. What is that exactly? It means that every time I sign into my accounts on an unknown device, I must do another layer of verification. And you have been using that. NCU asks you to do that in terms of your emails. So it ensures that if somebody is to break into my system, they must be able to get the access code, or like in Gmail, they must be able to get the device where I can tap and say, it is me. So that is called multi-factor authentication. What should you do if you want to mitigate some of these risks? Number three, you must avoid sharing personal information online. Avoid sharing personal information online, because in the open source intelligence type approach, before we make an attack, I'm talking ethically, before an attack takes place, we actually have a technique where we learn things about you. The more things you put about yourselves online, the easier it's going to be. And guess what? Let me just throw this in, Ms. Senior. Your digital footprint cannot be erased. Oh, I deleted the photo. Oh, I deleted this. Oh, I wiped my phone clean, until you send it to me and I do some forensics on it. And lo and behold, everything right there. The photos you didn't want anybody to see, you know? So the digital footprint is something that you cannot just delete and it's gone. Right? Another day I'll tell you why. Another thing that you must do is to monitor all accounts. I'm told that my time is up. Did I do 10 minutes? All right, so my time is up, so I'm going to wrap up momentarily. So the next thing is to monitor all accounts, and then be cautious when using public Wi-Fi. Can I just say that not because it says it's an open Wi-Fi, it means that you should log on. We have rogue Wi-Fi's that when you connect, you're actually sending all your data to a database somewhere else. So not all free Wi-Fi connections in the airport, etc., you should just tap into, because you're not sure exactly what is happening. So in closing, How do you stay safe online and within the context of your business? Always verify your email senders before clicking the links. Don't just download files from unknown sources. If you don't know the sources, do not download the files. Ensure that you update your devices, your laptops, your phones. If you have Windows 10 on your machine still, you need to change it immediately. You need to upgrade to Windows 11. Why? Because Windows 10 is no longer supported by Microsoft, so it means that you are now vulnerable. All right? If you go to a website and you're not seeing HTTPS, do not shop there. If you're not seeing the padlock, do not shop there, because it means that this site is not secured. And some of us, we have a sickness and I have that sickness. When you look on my browser, I have 100 tabs open. Any witnesses? 100 tabs open. I don't close out. But guess what? That's a risk, because the more you have these tabs open, it means that you have important things that are left open to the hacker. So you have to ensure that as best as possible, you close out when you use these things. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know this was a very short presentation and it's a big topic for 10 minutes, but in the company's setting, ensure that you follow all the security policies. That's a topic by itself, policies. Protect confidential data. Never share your login credentials. As a matter of fact, companies are saying you must have a clean desk policy. That means you don't write your password and put it on a sticky note and put on your desk. No. If you can't remember it, get a password vault and store it there. And if something happens, always report any suspicious activities as you are using the systems in your company and otherwise. Remember, cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility, so you must protect your identity while protecting not just NCU, but whichever organization you will work with. Thank you very much. I felt like I was rushing.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. And I'm just going to ask Ms. Roxanne Juggernaut to come and move the vote of thanks. I understand we're for time because there's an event plan here that's supposed to start in a while. So Ms. Roxanne Juggernaut.
Thank you. So on behalf of Northern Caribbean University College of Business Management, we would like to sincerely thank you for your informative presentation on cybersecurity. And I am sure all of us have incited your helpful and better understanding of how you explain the importance of protecting our information and being aware of online threats. We truly appreciate you taking your time to share your knowledge. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to invite Gianna Barham to come on stage. She's going to do something special at this point. Gianna, please come.
While Gianna is coming, for those of you who have not yet registered for LACE, that's a language and content, could you please see Dr. Edwards at the back before you go? Do not leave if you're not yet registered for LACE.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, on behalf of Northern Caribbean University, we would like to sincerely thank Ms. Senior for chairing this seminar. Your leadership and coordination ensured that everything ran smoothly and professionally. I'm sure that we all enjoyed it. Yes? Yes, so the seminar was both engaging and informative, and your effort played a key role in its success. So we truly appreciate you and your time, dedication, and contribution.
Thank you. Thank you, Roxanne. Let me say thank you to custodial, to special events, to the media team, to all the participants, for all of you that turn up. And Dr. Buckley should be very proud of you, and NCU should be very proud of you that the ethos of NCU is still alive and well. Thank you all. you please stand and let us sing the Alma Mater, the first one, the first verse. So it's singing time, so let me pass on the mic. Alma Mater. Just go ahead.
To the blessed hill you have brought us, where we've had our hopes and dreams fulfilled. All the glorious things you've taught us, midst the pine trees and the wind, we will rise and call you blessed as we strive to serve mankind. And we praise our God each moment for the love in you we find. And we praise our God each moment for the love in you we find. Oh, dear beacon on the hill, a bastion oh so true, we will love and loyalty in gratitude to you. March onward, ever upward, ever forward, Alma Mater NCU.
That was not a performance. You should have sung.